Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us again tonight. We are really honored and very happy to have with us today two members from the Reporters United team, Thanasis Koukakis and Nicholas Leondopoulos, who will give us their insights tonight about the wiretapping scandal in Greece. And we look forward to hearing how it all started, how it developed, and where we are at the moment. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. My name is Thanasis Koukakis, and I'm a reporter from Reporters United. And along with my colleague Nicholas Leondopoulos, we'll talk today about our investigation on Predator Gate, the surveillance scandal in Greece. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for having us today and for you for being here. To tell you the truth, we're not very we don't speak very often publicly, so it's not very easy for us. And so we would prefer that we go on with any discussion with you, so we will have a brief presentation. And Nicholas, I don't know if you want to add something from the beginning? No. He's shy. Then he will talk. The questions to Nicholas. So, yes, there is a presentation. Okay, I will start with that, and then I will give you some, I will press you to talk. So, basically, okay, this is a seminar, but we would like to tell you what happened in our investigation, and please feel free to pose any questions and to interrupt me, because I think that in this way it will be more interesting for you too. So back in December 2021, so 1 year and some months ago from today, a source contacted Nicholas about. He told Nicholas that I have to tell you something, we have to meet in person. It was only a month after the revelation of Efimerida, Syntakton, a Greek newspaper, that another colleague, Stavros Malichoudis, had been surveilled by ADAE in the past. And that was told.
No,
Stavros. Yes.
He contacted Stavros and me because Stavros Malichoudis, there was this report in Efimerida Syntakton in November 2021. About surveillance, and one of the victims of that surveillance was Stavros Malichoudis, who is a member of Reporters United, but mostly a reporter for Solomon, which is another independent investigative project.
And so the source, and correct me if I'm wrong, told Stavros and Nicholas that, you know, we're in December 2021. The revelation about Stavros was in November 2021, and basically the source told my colleagues that the Greek government changed the law regarding the National Security Services in Greece, ADAE, in March 2021, and made a significant change, which is that basically the Greek government prohibited the ADAE, which is the Greek Independent Authority for the Protection of Privacy, to inform citizens that in the past had been surveilled for reasons of national security. So then we started thinking if there is a case, if there is a story there, because we didn't know why the law changed, and it was very important to establish right from the beginning the case, if there is something, if there is a story to report on. And so the beginning was this source, and the first thing we did with this investigation, sorry for the Greek on the image, but this was published only in Greek. So we started with a very simple thing. We Googled and we tried to find other evidence or things that had been already published on the web. And
actually, to be a little bit more accurate about the details, the guy that approached us didn't exactly know what had happened, or didn't want to say what had happened, but knew that something had happened in spring 2021 that had to do with the way that surveillance is performed, let's say, operates in Greece. So we didn't even know that there was a change in the law, but we knew that something had changed in springtime 2021, and then we started finding, but...
Yes, what happened was that Yeah, sorry. Not used to that, sorry. So, yes, the funny thing that was that when we started Googling, it was as simple as that. We found out that 3 members of ADAE, of the Independent Authority, along with them, it was Christos Ramos, so the president of ADAE. They wrote an article about the change of the law regarding the national security services in Greece. And basically they said that this change may be against the Greek constitution, the European law, and the European law. So the thing here is that, okay, how do you start with a story? It's as simple as that. You try to find things that have been already published. And the problem here, and this problem I think regards us as journalists, is that 3 members of an independent authority wrote an article about this problematic situation, and the reporting on that was not very eager from mainstream media and from small media, but we really didn't know about that. So then we started investigating, and saying investigating, it was very simply what we did at the beginning. Firstly, we used documents from public and open sources. For example, here we found the document of, let's say, of the amendment of the law in the website of the Greek Parliament, which is a very easy thing to do, but it's the very basics. But there are also other platforms, the transparency platform, for example. It's called the Avia in Greece, where you can find public documents, and it's a very useful tool for journalists, but not only, also for researchers. There's also the OpenGov, the Commercial Register, and, for example, other platforms like Open Corporates, where you can find data of companies throughout the world. And this is open. What I want to say is that a big part of any investigation, as in this investigation, the information is already out there. So the thing is that you have to try to find it and to connect the dots. It's not as difficult at the beginning or in some aspects of the story. So, and that's also the tip. If the information we want is already out, maybe it's out, maybe no one has found it, but it's already there. And also the article that also, it can be so out that also there was an article from ADAE that no one has reported on that. So, do you want to add something so far? Because I monopolize.
We have to go fast because
okay.
there's so much to
okay.
say.
So yes, then we started with a story, writing the first story, and what we did, we went to the 2 members of the government, Mr. Pikramenos, the Deputy Prime Minister, and the Minister of Justice, Mr. Tsiaras, to tell us why they did this change of the law. They never respond, basically, but the important thing is that you have to always ask the other side. You have to ask all of the people involved in a story, but sometimes you get also useful information. So because Mr. Pikramenos essentially said that we have to ask APE, so he said that, okay, I voted for something, I brought something to the parliament, but it was APE that knew why this happened, which was crazy to see. So an important thing, an important aspect of the story, I don't know if you want to talk about that, is about the error we did. I mean, we committed a mistake, which is very interesting for the people.
Okay, so you get to speak about all the good stuff, and I
No. This is the real good stuff, I think, for the people.
No, but it's interesting because based on the parliament documents, we wanted to clarify in the story how the opposition had voted about the change of the law. Of course, the government had voted in favor of the change of the law. Kínημα Αλλαγής PASOK had voted in favor of the change of the law, which is actually quite ironic if you think what happened later on with Androulakis. They basically supported a law that would forbid the authorities to notify their leader that he was being surveyed. And the interesting thing was that the documents of the parliament were saying that Syriza also had voted against, in favor. And we had asked Syriza, and for me this is funny that for 2 days we were asking Syriza, what did you vote? And Syriza people did not know what they had voted. So in the end, we founded our knowledge only on what the parliament documents were saying, and actually because of one mistake of ours, we did a technical mistake that had to do with the numbering of the law. It was wrong. Actually, Syriza had voted against. And but we both do a big fuss about that because I think it's important that when the story came out, and again, let's remember, it's January 2022. We are very far from the scandal. But there was some negative reactions about that, and we were very fast to go on the record and saying that we were basically, it was a mess, that regarding Syriza, it was a mistake. Anyway, I mean, it's good to say that you are wrong. That's what I'm saying. It's fair to say we screwed up, yes, about this part, not about...
And there's also another thing that also the Greek media, and it's very difficult because when it was only on newspapers, you had to go on the next day and say, okay, I was wrong, because you have to write it. But a problem with the web media is that you can change things inside, but not saying that a previous version mentioned something that was wrong. So we always do that. So at the end, if we mess up as we did, we say that we changed something. We explicitly say that on the website, but also on the social media, because it's important to say that, okay.
And there's also an international problem that's not a Greek problem. You have even reputable publications like the New York Times that they do what they call stealth editing, which means that sometimes they edit their own pieces without notifying the public that they have changed it. So we try to be fair with that. When we change something, we always say it. We also tweeted about the mistake. But an additional remark I wanted to make, because for me this is one of the most important aspects of the whole story, is that you need to remember the timeline of the whole story. The surveillance scandal for us starts March 2021 when the parliament changed the law. It was interesting that when with Odoris we got the tip in December and we started going to the sources, to the people, to ask, after we found out that the law had changed, everybody in the business, let's say, knew about that. The politicians knew about that. Top journalists knew about that. Legal scholars, academics, university professors knew about that. So this means that basically from March 2021 until January 2022, for 8 months, everybody who is involved, let's say, close to this area of interest knew about the change of the law, but there was nothing. Nobody thought that this was important. And why was it important? Because this was the question we were trying to ask in the first piece, but we couldn't, and we were able to answer that a few months later, not just us, but also our colleagues from Inside Story, was that effectively, obviously, they changed the law because they wanted to hide the surveillance of somebody or of many people. So but I'm saying that because I'm shocked that for 8 months, a lot of people knew about that, and nobody thought it was something that you could, for example, write about this. Just write an op-ed in a newspaper or something.
So yes, that was a good bridge. If you want to go on with the message. So Nicholas said basically what happened next. It was like when we wrote the first article, then we were curious about finding why, for which surveillance the Greek government changed the law. And after a couple of months, we were able to establish the fact that the Greek government changed the law in order to not tell Thanasis Koukakis, a journalist that was investigating a financial crime, that he was under surveillance by ADAE in 2020, but also then almost a year later by Predator, by spyware Predator. What we wrote here is that before we said that there is a lot of information outside through public and open sources, but here we had, with Nicholas was very eager and passionate about that. We wanted to tell you the truth. We knew before, a lot of time before the publication, that Thanasis had been under surveillance, but we really wanted to find a way to convince people that this was true. So we wanted to see a document saying that, and that's what we did in this story. We got access to a to secret documents, and we published that on the basis that this is such a huge story that the top secret thing should go away, and we had to publish the information. And you wanted to tell more about how things unfold with Thanasis?
The interesting thing also is the timing. For us, this is a very dramatic week from a selfish point of view, because on Monday, on that April, Inside Story publishes the first story about Predator, reveals that Koukakis had been hacked by Predator. So from a very selfish point of view, we are very unhappy because a competitor, let's say, although they are not really competitors in the sense that with the journalists, Tasos Telegrou and Elisa Triantafylou, we are long-time friends. But imagine that we knew about Koukakis since January, and it took us 2.5 months to find out the evidence that he's being surveyed, and then you wake up a Monday morning and somebody says Koukakis is being hacked by Predator. Anyway, and 4 days later, on Friday, we had already the documents to try to be able to say out loud that we have the documents. You cannot, because with Predator, the government can always say it's not us, it's somebody else, it's some rogue businessman and so on. But because of the state documents, nobody could refute the fact that he was being surveyed. And actually, it was a good coincidence that because on one side you have Predator, but not knowing that it's a government. On the other side, you have proof that it's a government that is wiretapping his phone. So it's easy to make the assumption that one thing is closely related to the other. Because this is the narrative that the government has been trying from the start to say, that we have nothing to do with that. But if you link the two stories together, it's quite obvious that, of course, it's the same kind of surveillance.
Okay, this is exactly what we told you, that we had access to some top secret documents. We didn't publish the documents themselves, but we wrote their numbers, so it was quite clear to the readers, but also to the authorities, that we knew what we were talking about. Okay, then it's another aspect of the story is that we wanted from the beginning to talk about the people, the politicians that were responsible for the national security services, and it's also, this is another thing. We knew almost since the beginning of 2022, so when we started the investigation, that Grigoris Dimitriadis, the nephew and the Secretary General of the Greek Prime Minister, now, was responsible for the national security services. But we didn't have evidence for that. But gradually, we wanted to bring the story to the political responsibility. And in June 2022, we wrote the first story about how, about some business links between Grigoris Dimitriadis, and there are two stories, one in June and one in August, one day before he resigned, between Grigoris Dimitriadis and Felix Biggiou, which is the shareholder and ex-deputy administrator of Intellexa, the company, the Greek company based in Athens that trades Predator. We thought that this is very important. We wrote in the article that we don't know if this means that the Greek government has used Predator, but it was under the light of the fact that Thanasis Koukakis had been surveilled by Predator, and the fact that there were targets of Predator in Greece, as Inside Story had revealed. We thought that it was super important, and it was impossible for us not to publish this kind of links, because we have the person that the politician that was politically responsible for APE, for the National Security Services, on the same time was something like a businessman and connected through a network of business people and of companies linked to Intellexa of Predator, to Felix Biggiou. We went on. Something that we, thanks to our colleagues and to people at Reporters United, as this was a very complicated story, as you can see from this thing, we tried to keep it simple and small. The fact is that this story has also been published at Efsyn, and this was great because there's not a lot of space in a newspaper, so the guys there say, keep it short, so this helps us. And we tried to establish all the connections with graphics and with images, which was very important for us. And then again, the crazy thing is that all the connection between all the a lot of about the business of and the contracts of Dimitriadis were already published in the public business register. So it was there for years, and it was very important for us because we tend to say that we don't have access to documents in Greece, but this was Yemi, the business registry. It was very important to use, and everything was there. So, okay. Yes. Do you want to talk about our trip to Attica? So yes, another thing is that we went with Nicolas. It was summer in June. To photograph the. This is also let's say part of the business of Dimitriadis because this was the kind of things that he was involved in energy, that he bought and sold, and all these connections with Biggiou. We went there, it was great because we would spend a lot of time in the office, so it was great to go out. And again, we asked all the guys. Basically, this is for 3 reasons, because first of all, you are ethically obliged as a journalist to ask all the people involved in a story. Secondly, it's the curiosity, because these people can give you an information, even, let's say, okay, the bad guys, there's no bad guy in a story, but you know, the guy that you write in order to keep accountable, let's say. And of course, it's the possibility of going to court, because going out and ask people in good faith that we have this kind of proof. What do you say about that? Is it true or not? You have to show this good faith also in court when you go. And in this.
Before you turn the page, I always like the last part of the quote, his answer. This part that he says, how can I translate? Nobody respects, like me, the journalistic work. It's funny, this coming from a guy who then sued us for €500,000.
Yeah.
Yes, anyway.
That's why he asks a lot of money, because he respects us. So he wouldn't go for a few. So, okay, yes, then we have another. So when we published the first story in June, and sorry for, okay, the image is on them, this is my fault. And we, okay, in Greece it's very, when someone wants to go to court to sue you, he or she has to send before a legal notice, what we say in Greek exodiko. So it's a legal notice before going to court in order to give you, okay, the idea is that before going to court, okay, give the newspaper or the reporter the opportunity to understand if they are wrong, and to say, okay, we were wrong, in order to avoid court. So the thing there, to tell you the truth, it was a little bit stressful, because when you take this kind of legal notices, the first thing you think is that, okay, I made a mistake and really it was bad for the guy. And so what we did is, as they say, we tried to check sober if we had made a mistake, which was important. It's more important than going to court, because the first thing that you don't want to do is to tell a lie about a person. So, and if we were wrong, we would be the first people to go out saying, okay, that was a mistake and we feel sorry. And it's a matter of courage as journalists to do that. But there we read the documents, and it was, we thought that the story was it was okay. We didn't say anything wrong about Dimitriadis, but we still then, as we were very eager, we published all the content and the document of the legal notice of Dimitriadis, and 2 more business people that also sent legal notices against us on the same day. It was very funny, because there was people, different people coming with documents, and we didn't know if they knew each other. So, and the important thing was to go on with the story, not think of the legal notice. Okay, you see the legal notice, if you're wrong, you say you're sorry, and you change the story. If not, you go on, and you don't think of that. Even if from this point we knew that maybe there would be a lawsuit against us. We're in June now, and we thought, okay, maybe Dimitriadis would go for that, because it is when the story starts to seem like a big story.
But an extra observation on that, because again, for me, the interesting part is the silence, that the story is a taboo for almost everybody. So, I don't know, I'm obsessed with this timeline. Again, March 2021, the law changes until January 2022, nothing happens, okay? Then journalists from very small media start publishing on that. And you have important evidence. It's an important thing that in a Western liberal democracy and all that stuff, you have a financial reporter who is being wiretapped by the state and by Predator as a threat to national security because he was doing stories about the banks. And it's quite striking that for 8 months, from January until August, until you have a real political scandal, nobody in the Greek press is writing about that. It's literally nobody, I mean, besides Inside Story and us. I know it sounds very self-referential, but I'm not saying that for this. I'm saying that because this is a real problem. You have newspapers like Efimerida that are supposed to serve this liberal tradition in Greece and have some of the best reporters in Greece. And this I say that honestly because we are friends with all these reporters and we knew that they would be really interested in going after the story. They publish nothing. And even, for example, after Koukakis, there is evidence about Koukakis, some judge will announce a small investigation on what has happened. And this is a new story, and Kathimerini will publish 300 words about that. And on the following day, they will delete the story from their online version. And they do this 2 or 3 times during the year. And I find it quite depressing that you have, you know, good mainstream newspapers. I'm not saying that against Kathimerini because most of what they do, I think it's really good journalism. But imagine that for 8 months this is happening in the country and nobody really wants to take notice until, of course, August when it becomes a different story because then it's Androulakis. And actually there is pressure from the outside. There are press associations and international organizations that publish statements about the freedom of press in Greece and all that.
So, yes, this is the story. Okay, you will say that the story about the New York. So this is the second story we wrote about Grigoris Dimitriadis and his connections to be very, very precise, through a network of companies and business people to Felix Biggiou of Intellexa, of Predator. And this story was published in 4th of August, so a day before the resignation of Grigoris Dimitriadis. The story played a role, but in order to be super, super honest, it is the day, also this day and the next day, that the Androulakis story has come out. Basically, the European Parliament has informed a week before, something like that, that he has been targeted with Predator. And it's when the ADAE, the independent authority, they try to understand if and how Androulakis has been surveilled also by APE. So the next day, okay, we have the story out in 5. Grigoris Dimitriadis resigns. Then we have the resignation of the head of APE, Panagiotis Kontoleon, and then we have the same day it is revealed basically by the Greek government, because they knew from inside that Androulakis had been surveilled by APE. So it is when the scandal comes out as a national scandal of surveillance. As you can see, again, we tried to connect the dots and to bring all the information into something easily readable by the readers, and again with all the connections you can see. And yes, another thing is that, again, as Nicola said, and we try to do that even with into our stories, as our investigation went on along with Inside Story, 2 independent investigations, but it was very important for us that we wanted to credit people and to support their investigation, but this was also a way, to give more credit to our stories too, because it was a common. The one dot of Inside Story was connected to our investigation. So that's it. So basically, everything changes in August, and Nicolas has to say the story. Maybe you don't want to say that. Okay, it's a pity because it's a good story. So yes, another thing is that we have talked so far for how we went on with the investigation, and something very important was that how we protect the sources through, going on with the investigation. We understood that, okay, of course, when we realized that Thanasis Koukakis was surveilled, it was for us very, okay, we thought that maybe the national security services follow us or inside story for their investigation. So for this reason, the problem there is that, okay, you can take as much risk as you want, or you can say, I don't care about that, I will go on. The problem is that with the sources, because if the authorities can identify the sources, then you cannot protect your sources, then they can go against the sources, they can blackmail them, they can do a lot. And basically, after some months, two very good colleagues, Tassos Teloglu and Yiannis Lavranos, Tassos in the Heinrich Bell Stiftung website and Yiannis Lavranos at Καθημερινή, they exposed how the Greek authorities and policemen followed journalists covering the surveillance scandal. So what we did in order to protect ourselves is that even before we acted as if we were under surveillance, which means we closed our phones, we checked our phones in order to see if we had spyware, no predator for me and Nicolas. We use encrypted apps, and we try to change the places we meet people. We regularly don't use the same place twice or more. And okay, in a sense, okay, we try to understand if we were followed. I didn't, notice anything. I'm not very good at that, but okay, you have to be careful because then you can, think that you're in a movie and then you get crazy and you don't do your job. So yes, that's important, not to think that you're too important.
But I want to add something on this. It's something that Teloglu had already told us, but then he published which is one of the best pieces that was written throughout the year, this piece that he wrote about his own personal experience with the wiretapping scandal, because this has to do with the surveillance against Thodoris. So, and I think it's still a huge thing, and I'm kind of amazed that nobody gives attention to that. What happened was that the National Security Service has this software that collects metadata, maybe is not able, like Predator, to wiretap your communications, but collects metadata from your phone, which means that by following digitally the traces of Thodoris, the software was able to create a tree with the people he was meeting. We found out about that several months later, but this meant that during spring, for example, when we were doing really difficult work because some of those people had to do with the story itself and had to do with the state and all that, it meant that the state might be able to map our meetings, and maybe they did not know what we were saying in those meetings, but they knew, for example, because this is an actual example, Thodoris was victim of this surveillance, to map his connections. His connections might be his friends, might be his colleagues, but they were even able to say that at this cafe, at this place, he had met this source. And the second thing I want to say about the story that Lavranos wrote in Καθημερινή, and this was published, I think, in October or something like that, there is this tiny paragraph in the story which says that the Greek government had given orders to police officers to do physical surveillance of journalists in the center of Athens. So personally, I find it really extreme that you can give an order to policemen to just go around the city and follow journalists like that, and nothing happens. I'm saying that because the story was written. It's good that Καθημερινή published it. It's not good that it was hidden in a paragraph because it's a very big thing. But again, it's about the impact of the story. Nobody moved. Nothing happened when you have the revelations that actually the police is physically following journalists while they are walking in Athens.
Yeah. So then we. Okay.
Sorry, Lavranos had the information. It was not an abstract information. It was about this policeman and this policeman and this policeman from those precincts had the order to do this kind of physical surveillance in the middle of the city. So I think it's really extreme.
So then the day Dimitriadis resigned, we got our lawsuit. It was against Nicholas, me, Efsyn, Syntakton, Reporters United, and Thanasis Koukakis, because he tweeted the story, and everything was together. So, and Dimitriadis now is asking more than €500,000. He has been this move has been condemned by international and Greek associations and organizations in the that support the freedom of the press and speech. But then, of course, we published the fact. We wanted our readers to know that what has happened, and of course, we went on. We saw the lawsuit. It was basically based on the legal notice before, so it was nothing new. So the best thing to do was to inform people and just go on with investigation. SLAPPs have this kind of target, de facto, even if the guy that does that doesn't want it. As strategic lawsuits, they want to make you spend more time with the lawsuit than with the reporting. So this was something we didn't want, and so we tried to go on with investigation. Again, we published two more stories. Again, the one was that a businessman called Yiannis Lavranos, a best friend of Grigoris Dimitriadis, also involved in the Predator gate. Allegedly, he had several connections with members of the government, like Pierakakis, like Ministers Pierakakis, Panagiotis. You can see in the photo the circles there. It's the Minister of Defense and the businessman. And of course, we try to combine different kind of evidence. Like we have a leaked fake Italian identity card with the face of Lavranos, of this businessman, and he's not Italian, he's Greek. So this was totally fake. We also used public documents from the business registry. You can see here the photo, and of course some leaks with photographs that in order to write the story. And again, the good thing there was that, and the most interesting is that you have, as I told you, it's interesting to ask the other guy on the opposite side, and we had the opportunity to meet Lavranos and to ask a lot of things, and it was to meet him in person. It was something we tried a lot, but with this story he accepted that, and we learned a lot, and it gives you, as a journalist, when you meet someone, it's a different story because you can understand better the motives and the guy you're talking to. And we were writing about him a lot of months, but seeing the person was another thing.
One small addition on Lavranos, because for those who have followed the story, you know that by now we know that you have these three persons in the core of the story. One politician, Dimitriadis, and his two, let's say, associates, which is Lavranos and Biggiou. I find it extremely interesting that Lavranos is this guy who has been taking national security contracts since 2013 with many Greek governments, actually with all Greek governments, New Democracy, then Syriza, then again New Democracy, and so on. Very close ties to ministers, again, of all governments, mostly with New Democracy, but also with Syriza. But we did this story with the help of Thanasis Koukakis, who had been reporting a lot on Lavranos. And it's a little bit extreme that you have this guy who deals with the state as a national security contractor, and at the same time, this guy, you go back to the boards of his companies, and you find several people who never existed. They are fake people, fake ID cards. He invented people. We went to the Italian authorities to find traces of these people, and either the people never existed, or the ID documents that were used in the boards of those companies, and again, these are companies that are dealing with the Greek state on a national security level. There were ID cards that were stolen in Naples 10 years ago. And again, it's interesting that the journalists, again, with the help of Thanasis, of course, were able to find this out, and the Greek governments and the Greek states were dealing with this guy buying surveillance software, and the Greek Ministry of Defense buying top secret equipment and things like that.
So the last story we published on that is that basically the Greek government in March 2021 did something strange. They said that, okay, the Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of Digital, governance, digital governance, yes, Perakakis, they would create, with their decision, a digital archive of the Independent Authority for Privacy. But it's crazy because they did something, they decided something positive, but then they never applied their law and they never created this archive and this created basically a problem for this surveillance scandal, because as the Greek authority does not have a digital archive, so they cannot go on a laptop and see which people have been surveilled, because they have to be informed by the National Security Services and all the Greek services, being able to surveil somebody. They have to go to the three telecommunication companies, Wind, Vodafone, Cosmote, and ask them which people have been surveilled, because ADAE, the Independent Authority, has a physical archive, which means thousands of papers in a room, but it's impossible to check them because there are thousands of surveillance cases every year. So basically the problem is that the state depends basically de facto on multinational companies to know, the Independent Authority protected by the Constitution, to know which people have been surveilled in Greece.
Yes, and again, extremely ironic that the state, ADAE does not know. It's interesting if you see those national security documents, a surveillance document, for example, that you see only the number of the person that is being under surveillance, but you do not know who owns this number. But this basically means that the only authority in Greece that knows who's being surveyed is the three telecom providers. Now, and of course, the National Security Service. But if you think again, and maybe you think we are a little bit exaggerating, who are these three telecom providers? It's not only that they are private companies. It's not only that the watchdogs that are supposed to protect the Constitution. The Parliament knows nothing. The Επιτροπή Θεσμών και Διαφάνειας, the Parliamentary Committee for Transparency in Institutions, knows nothing. They know. But it's interesting that you have three companies. One is OTE, which is a full subsidiary of Deutsche Telekom, with a long history record in Greece of wiretaps, proven. Deutsche Telekom, the German state via Deutsche Telekom was surveying 2,000 political and business targets in Greece 10 or 15 years ago. Then you have Vodafone, which is the company that was doing the surveillance with the Americans in the famous wiretapping scandal with Tsalikidis and everything, surveying even the Prime Minister. And the third one is Wind, owned by this Serbian businessman, anyway, very interesting story, that now is also buying Nova and Alpha. And again, the paradox is that those are the entities that know, and all the others know nothing. And even ADAE cannot know nothing because the government does not allow them to create a digital archive. And with the new law that was voted a couple of months ago, it has become literally impossible to ADAE to have a real archive and to get access to this archive. So we are still subject to the knowledge of the three private telecom providers.
Yes. So yes, the two last tips from our investigation, things that we learned, is that the thing is that, okay, this is stolen from an interview. You know, a Pulitzer winner colleague told in an interview. So you don't have to be afraid. Your job is not to be afraid. So you don't have to, you know, to take into account the SLAPP cases and the attacks on Twitter. Of course, if you have written the truth. And another strange thing that happened to us was a spear phishing operation against Reporters United. So basically what happened is that one day, while we were doing the story about Lavranos, Reporters United received an email from a fake journalist that said that he had a website which was fake with no story, and it was created, as we found out, some days before or the same day that we received the email, making some difficult, let's say, questions about us in order to intimidate us. And basically the most important thing is that in this email, some financial data of Reporters United, accessible only to the state, were leaked. So
our tax data, our let's say our taxes net data was in that email with questions to us.
So this was also another story we published in order to tell people what happened. And basically after our article and after an intervention of Reporters Without Borders, the international organization, which is important to say, supports us with the cost of the legal lawsuit from Dimitriadis. And the tax authority, the independent tax authority in Greece, ADAE, which is different from ADAE, they're very close, but they have started an investigation in order to understand how the tax data of Reporters United have been illegally leaked. And the last thing we have is, yeah, sorry.
Very small thing. We received this email from the fake journalist and the fake website 5 days before, before the lawsuit. Oh, we didn't say that.
No.
So it was quite obvious, at least to us. Maybe we are conspiracy theorists, but you receive this email that is a spear phishing operation. Somebody has set up a fake website, fake domains, fake identity of a journalist, etc. They have access to Taxes.net to see your tax data and all that, just 5 days before we were in court with Dimitriadis against us. So, I don't know, it makes you wonder who might have done it.
Yes, and the last not very serious thing, because the tip is that, is, okay, don't take yourself too seriously. This is too, yes, we try to make fun of us with Nicolas. This is when we went to make some photos, you know, with the panels we showed you. It was, you know, north of Attica, and it was very interesting. Nicolas really courageously tried heroically to make some good photos, and he did. The photo was of him, to tell the truth. And I just was there, you know, walking, as you can see. And, you know, the thing is that you don't have to take, you know, with all this scandal and all this attention to this scandal, it's important not to, you know, to keep calm and not to be like, think that you're something special, you know. That was from our side. I hope it was not so boring for you. And please, if you have any questions or things to say, please.
Thank you so much for this. It has been terrific to follow the story, because we have been following the story snippets, you know, since you have been publishing. But it's the first time, at least myself, that I'm listening to the story from the beginning to the end. So we've got plenty of questions for you. But first, we won't abuse our role as chair. So questions first for the public and then for us. So if there are any questions, please go ahead. There is a microphone and we're using it for the recording.
Hello. I'd like to ask something about your physical safety, because we have a certain unsolved crime with a certain journalist. I wanted to ask whether the collaboration with foreign media or other journalists here in Greece, and mostly teams of journalists, helps the ones who might want to hurt the journalists to reconsider taking any such an action. That's my question. Thank you.
Nicholas is very shy. I always talk so, yes, humble, you know, no. So, yes, to tell you the truth, regarding the okay, so far, the most important thing to say is that I didn't have, and I think also Nicholas, we didn't have any kind of physical attack, you know, or even, you know, something close to that. And of course, I think that that something that helps us a lot is that we write our stories with our name. So people that would think of something, doing something bad to us, I have nothing to prove something like that, but would think twice because we write with our names. The second thing is that it plays a great role, the fact that international organizations like the International Press Institute, SIA from Greece, Reporters Without Borders, the European Association of Journalists, and other, now I forget, I'm sorry for that, but a lot of international and Greek associations have condemned the lawsuit of Dimitriadis, and they have brought the story into light. I think this also protects us. And another thing is that I also believe that the lawsuit creates a physical protection for us, because if there's a lawsuit against us, so I think that some people would not like us to, to have a problem with that. So I think that everything, that all this helps. Of course, I really believe that the situation of the media in Greece is, of course, we have the Karaivas case. For us, we didn't have any kind of this kind of something against us, but we have the killing of a journalist in 2010 and Karaivas. Both we have not. No, the Greek authorities have not found the who did it, and this is very bad because it's people tend to say that how do you know that these people were killed because they were journalists? The thing is that journalists, and this is not only about journalists, it's about activists, about lawyers, about people having public, talking in public or being in public sphere, so it regards all of us. If these people, if we don't know who killed Karaivas, then people can assume that this was because, and this is enough to make you silent, and this is the problem. So that's, I think, is a big problem.
Very small information on the collaboration between journalists. I find it very interesting that throughout the year when we were reporting, we had an open channel with the two journalists from Inside Story, and we knew very well that we were competing, but we were having meetings, telling them what we do. They were telling us what they did. They helped us a couple of times also. Also, other journalists from the mainstream media that could not pursue their stories, we were also having meetings with them. We were having tips with them. One of the most important stories we did throughout the year that had to do with Greek mafia, which is, I mean, another big story, like on the side of the wiretaps surveillance affair, came from a tip from another journalist working for a mainstream news organization. So, and I think this is new in Greece, that you can be pessimistic as much as you want about what is happening, but I believe on the positive side that what is happening right now in Greece in the journalism scene is quite positive. I'm not talking just about us, talking about other small media, and even talking about mainstream journalists that are trying to reach out. Not all of them, though. I mean, you also have the opposite. I mean, there was a quite famous journalist that throughout the whole year was through a big publication attacking, for example, ADAE members and calling them traitors and spies and Turkish whatever. So you also have this type of journalists, of course.
Congratulations for your work. I just want to ask you, because when you're doing research, about something, you want it to be public, you want it to, the society to care about it. Do you really feel, because you said at some point that it's strange, or you find it strange that people in Greece, they seem that you say, you write it, you make your research, and then you feel like nobody cares or nobody's talking about. So first of all, do you feel that really in the Greek society your research does have an impact? So, and in the forthcoming elections will have an impact, in people's way to vote. And the second thing is that, no, answer first, and then I'll tell you.
Well, this story had impact. But we were lucky with the impact, and you have so many other meaningful stories that do not have this kind of impact. But I don't think that you can measure the importance of journalism with impact. Of course, it's good if somebody resigns because something happened, and it's good if you have an investigation. And even on elections level, although this is more tricky because we don't want to take sides here, but I think it's important for this type of journalism to be there even if there's no impact, because you have to imagine the whole story without that reporting. So for me it's important that you have that there even as a record, as a record that testifies from what has happened, even if there's not a huge kind of wave of protests in Greece. I mean, the problem is the opposite, that you have a lot of apathy. Things happen and nobody cares. And actually for me, the biggest take of the surveillance story in hindsight, now that nothing happens, is that I become kind of, I have a small kind of depression if I think that this thing has happened, then again, nothing happened in the country, if you think about that. And I'm very much unhappy about that, because it creates this new status of, there is this Greek word anomia. I think it also exists in English.
Lawlessness?
Lawlessness, but they also call it anomia sometimes. Yes. That you can, if you get away with it, then anybody can do whatever they want and they can get away with it. I mean, there's no limit after that. But on the positive side, the fact that the stories are there, and you have so many stories now from the small independent media in Greece, from Solomon, from Manifold, from Mir, I think it's important even without the big numbers in the impact.
Because one thing is the involvement of the government that makes it really important, and the other thing, and this is what I alluded actually, is the fact that nowadays with the technology, you have many people in the society. They think that, yeah, anyways, they follow and they survey everything. So we're surveyed everywhere. So that's just another case of surveillance. In this way, you have this numbness of people, because anyways, we're surveyed. So what's the big deal?
There's only one thing I want to add to what Nicola said and to your previous question, is that the story was impactful. Maybe you also mean that a lot of people don't talk about that in their everyday life, but I think that this is our responsibility, the responsibility of the reporters and the media, and we have to be hard against us and to criticize ourselves, because people and the public opinion will not understand something as a scandal if the perception in the big media, in the mainstream media, or in the majority of the media is not, the story is not perceived as a scandal. When Dimitriadis resigned, I was on a boat to an island, and all the TV, on TV there was one face, the face of Dimitriadis, and I thought that all people now are watching Dimitriadis, and people don't know who Dimitriadis is. They don't even know that he's the General Secretary of the Prime Minister, because before it was only this, very good reporting that Dimitriadis is efficient. Dimitriadis talks with the one powerful guy. Dimitriadis talks with another powerful guy. He can unblock everything regarding the investments. And all of a sudden, but people didn't know. It was people's fault? No, it's our fault. There is a scandal. There is a different thing between having a scandal and perceiving something as a scandal, or giving people to understand that this is a scandal. When the TV stations don't talk about the surveillance scandal as a scandal, people will not understand. So it's not people, it's us, it's reporters. And I think that this is the most dramatic thing for our job, and that makes me a little bit pessimistic. But it's not people's fault, it's our fault. People understand, but you have to give people the opportunity to understand.
For this specific issue, especially
yes,
being surveyed.
I mean, what can people do? You have a story that lasts for a year, and the only kind of resistance you had came from 3 people in the ADAE board. If you think about that, nobody really reacted. Journalists did not react. I mean, again, we told you that we know about 2 top journalists that knew I mean, there is this top journalist that knew since March 2021 about the change of the law, and actually he was outraged. And he went to the Prime Minister himself, and he said, this is nonsense, what you are doing. But in his own media, in their own media, they printed nothing. So journalists did not move. The judges did not move. Investigators did not move. Academics did not move. Only the 3 people from ADAE, if you think about it. If they hadn't written that article in a small review called Constitutionalism, that nobody knows about that, there would be nothing. So the problem is, how can you expect from, let's say, ordinary people to react if all the other institutions in the country...
No, because I'm saying that for society, unfortunately, I have the feeling that already it's a given. That for people, they feel that we're surveyed anyway. So you bring the proof, but for something that, apart from conspiracy, people feel that already is happening.
Yes, but if you have media saying that this is not true, and regardless, people should take the responsibility, and this should not happen, if you have media every day saying the opposite, people would change.
Yeah,
I mean,
mainstream media, sure. Yeah.
Yes, I cannot blame people. I don't. I think it's our fault, and it's crazy, because if you think that people shape their views from what they hear every day and what they see, watch. What should
nowadays, it's a little bit more their fault of people than before, because you do have access.
You don't.
And you don't. If you want to search.
You're right, but I mean, we are a small community of journalists. We cannot reach anyone. We cannot reach people in the countryside.
True. Thanks.
Have we got any more questions, Philippa?
Can you give us more details, if it's possible, about your colleagues, journalists, working in the mainstream media? Do we have different kind of categories? Do we have a taxonomy? I don't know. Can you give us some description about what kind of journalists they decided not to speak about that, not to write about that? Do you know other people that they were mad, that they would like to write, but they couldn't because there was a lot of pressure on them not to write anything about that? How many categories of journalists do we have in Greece in the mainstream media?
Well, I mean, to be very simplistic, you can say you have good journalists and bad journalists, but there are really a lot of very good journalists in mainstream media. There are really a lot, and it's a huge struggle because they are censored or self-censored because they know the deal. We have a colleague working for one of the best newspapers in Greece, correspondent in Brussels, and the day that the story with Koukakis was revealed, he went on the record in the Commission, in the European Commission press room, and he asked a question to the Commission, and the Commission responded, and it became a real issue in the Commission. His medium, his news organization did not appreciate. But he had the guts to do it. So you have lots of people that are against that and are trying to do their best. And actually, you can also see the coverage after August. Lots of good reporting when it became wide and public, etc. Of course, you have also other people that are not, we wouldn't even consider them as journalists. You have a widespread problem in Greece, for example, with journalists working both for a news organization and for the state. A year ago, we were doing a story about the Greek-Turkish relations, and Thodoris wanted to do an interview with a minister of the government, and he made a formal request, and he got a phone call by his aide, his top aide, let's say the director of his cabinet. And the guy was on the speaker, and I said, I know this voice. Why do I know this voice? And I knew this voice from the radio, because he's a guy that I listen every day on the radio. So the guy whom I listen every day on the radio is the same guy who is the director of the cabinet of a top minister. Yes, and you have lots of examples like that, or working for companies. We had this story a few months ago for one of the top hospitals in Greece by a female colleague of ours, with the Iaso hospital. Again, mainstream press knew about the story, they didn't want to publish. And the guy representing EASO, again, is a well-known journalist, known to us. You have so many examples like that, journalists with two hats, you know? But then you have also all the other colleagues that are just doing their job for a mainstream news organization. Most of the stuff that they're writing is really good. I really think, I'm not saying that in a hypocritical way, they're really good journalists, but they know their limits. That's the problem. And it's not a Greek problem, it's an international problem.
How's it different to the past? I mean, was it better? Sorry, yeah, you're right. You as journalists, do you have the feeling that that's, I mean, the environment that you describe now with good and bad journalists and pressure from many sides to the journalists, is it different from, I don't know, 50 years ago? Was it the case always for journalism? No, I'm not talking about your personal experience. I mean, as being journalists and talking about journalism, not nowadays, in the past, when there were so many scandals in the past as well. What makes it different nowadays, if you know? I mean, I don't know. How
in those problems were always there, but there is this, I think, illusion that because of the internet, it's much better now. In many ways, it's not much better now. I have this friend who was watching the news one day when the scandal was at its top, and in the whole news, there was nothing about the scandal, the surveillance scandal. You know, he watched everything, all 4 TV channels, like he was obsessed this evening. And he was saying, imagine if Mitsotakis tomorrow quits, and I were a viewer of Mega, Antenna, Alpha, or whatever, I wouldn't know why he quit. You know, I wouldn't know that. And it's true. It's true. We have lots of things like that. One story that we've been covering with Odoris since March that had to do with the war in Ukraine, had to do with the role of Greek ship owners in transporting oil from Russia to the rest of the world. And we did this trip to Kalamata some months ago because this is one of the hubs that they are doing it. And I mean, this should be a big story. It's a big international story. Bloomberg is writing about that. The New York Times, Greece, almost nobody is writing about that. So, I mean, of course, you have that. But I cannot answer to your question because I don't know. In some ways, it is better. Again, an interesting thing. You have now these new generations of people, of journalists, in their 20s and their 30s. And it's very interesting how they don't consider the big media as important. They don't even have the ambition to work for TV.
Good point. Yeah.
That's very important, I think. They have, it's not like they are like idealists. No, they have an ambition to become important and to have the credit, etc. But they don't think that working for those reputable organizations is the key, you know? That's very important. Yeah. And some of them are alone, are freelancers. Most of them are freelancers. They don't even have a stable job. I mean, in the ecosystem of the small media, almost nobody has a stable job. They don't even know if in 3 months there will be enough money in that little project for the project to survive. But there's still this wave of journalists in their 20s and 30s that this is their decision now.
Yeah. I don't know if we have nowadays, because, you know, we had this ideal of, let's say, Washington Post, you know, big scandal coming out from them. I don't know if this can happen nowadays from big mainstream media, you know, scandals that come out from
Greek
them.
Media?
In particular, yeah, for Greece.
No, I think that, yes, only if it has to do with the opposition party, or, you know, the opposite party.
Yeah, it's targeted, yeah,
yes.
to them. Yeah.
If you see, for example, that how, okay, you know, Nikos Papas, the ex-minister of Syriza, was today condemned. Condemned, is that the right word? Okay, and it was first page at Proto Thema Καθημερινή for hours. Dimitriadis never made it, unfortunately for him, even though he was, I mean, yes, I'm sure if I go now, I will see it first page at Proto Thema immediately. This is the problem. And then the problem is that people are not, as we said before, people are not idiots. They understand. And then they say journalists are corrupt. And they have some good reasons to believe that. But what I wanted to tell something, and Nicola said something important about the media. It's true that it's very difficult to survive. And to tell you the truth, I'm not sure how a journalist, a reporter would survive in 30 years or in 40 years, maybe people will go away and new will come. But the fact that today I'm feeling really blessed that I live in this era, that I don't have to take the permission of a ship owner to write a story. And this is something that sometimes we forget, but this fact that we work in small communities, it may be difficult, but it's a blessing because, you know, I have not, I know from my very small experience that when you go to ask for the permission of story, and you know that this story is there, and you have sources, and you have people that want to read it, and the ship owner says no, this is a very bad thing.
Yeah, true, I agree.
Okay.
Hi. My first question is if you can please summarize the public government datasets that you used in your work, and if all the government data that you used were public and online, or you had to go to some ministry of something and ask for the paper. And my second question is, you mentioned that you were tipped off about some things, and you went online and tried to verify them using the Avia and other public data sources. So my question is, does it work the other way around? Did you try to, for some stuff like Bistios or the connections that you made with Predator, did you try to go to the Avia and exhaustively find every connection and find what you find? That's it.
Yes. For the first question, we can create, if you want, you know, a list of open sources that we use for different reasons. I can tell you that the majority of the information was online, I mean, accessible in some ways. Of course, there were some documents that had to be seen or leaked, so the leak plays an important role there. For example, with the evidence that Thanasis Koukakis had been surveilled by APE, but of course the Avia is one, Yemi is another one, so the business registry. What else? Open corporates, as I told you. There is this Prometheus thing, which is very difficult to use for public contracts. There are a lot of things that we can use, and also on a European level. But regarding the Avia, we tried a lot. I don't think that Predator is there. We really tried to find. It would be really a risk of national security if the people involved in that would opt for going, you know, public with Predator. But I don't think that and our tips and our resources say that it's not there. Of course, it's been hidden in a, you know, in a secret document, if even it's in a document. So yes, we tried, but it's not there.
And as you said, it's true that it works both ways. Some of the work that has been done, also by our colleagues, is based on this search of documents through the public, the openly accessible documents. But as Thodoris is saying, the problem is that there is a limit to that. For example, one of the stories that we did not publish, and for us it has been one of the most important stories, we realized at one point that a contract for cybersecurity, a very important contract of cybersecurity, was submitted from the Greek government to the RFF, Resilience and Recovery Fund, for a contract of 40 million euros to be paid by the European funds. And it was very interesting that because they had to submit the contract there, we would know about the existence of the contract. Otherwise, we would not know that the contract existed. And in that form that everybody can read, you can Google it and you find it, it was very interesting that the whole process, the tender process for this 40 million contract for cybersecurity was decided by a decision taken by the Prime Minister. We have the number of this decision, but it's a secret decision. and then everything that had to do with the tender is secret. And then you wonder, is it good that in a democracy the Prime Minister can make decisions whose content is secret? So he created a tender process with conditions that are top secret. We still do not know them. The only reason that we know about the secret decision is that because it was submitted to the Europeans to give us the money. So there's a limit to that. But of course, I mean, there's huge potential to do good journalism with those data sets. In a story that we did a couple of years ago, we found out that, for example, and actually it's interesting, this has been a decision by the Troika, they was obliged to open up all their public contracts that go back 10 or 15 years ago. If you look there, and actually we did some kind of scraping and we published the data set in our website, you can find treasures. We found with a simple Googling that they, still kind of a semi-public company, you know the Pecha story with the contracts to the media, like 20, 25 million. The same thing was done by they, and nobody knew. They gave an advertising budget of 22 million euros, that most of it goes to media, which is an indirect way to control the media, of course, if you have so much money being dispersed to media. But you could see it through their data set, which is openly accessible in their website.
Have we got more questions? Yes, please.
Thank you. I want to ask about what do you think are the causes of this numbness, and what do you think could be done to take care of it, or reduce it, or alleviate it?
Very difficult. How can, I mean, it's so difficult, but sometimes I think that you need, that even if when you have good journalism, it's not enough. You need other institutions or other organizations, let's call them political organizations. If we had credible trade unions, and if we had credible parties, and if we had credible, I mean, journalism by itself cannot do much, but my impression is that you need to restore the trust in all those institutions that in the last, and organizations, and the political parties are part of it, that in the last 20 or 30 years have completely lost their credibility with the public. And of course, journalism is one of them, no doubt about that. You can't expect the people to just go out in the streets just like that, that one day they decide to just run to Syntagma and protest about the wiretaps. I don't know how you can do it, but I don't believe that it's always the fault of the public. For example, let's take journalism as an example. Everybody says the reason that people do not have trust to journalism, they're right. I mean, they shouldn't be trusting journalists. They shouldn't be trusting news organizations. There's a huge transparency issue. We do not even know the owners of the media in Greece. I would even say that even with small media, this is a problem. So you must start by not just defending, but by making it a huge fact to the public. Who funds you? What is the money that you spend per year? Where this money is going? And maybe this is the way that you can slowly again restore trust. Speaking about our field. I didn't answer, but it's difficult to find a good answer.
The only thing I would like to add is that regarding reporters, Nicholas is right that it's broader, but regarding us, I think, okay, now I may be a little bit arrogant, but it's the age. We have to be less afraid, is as simple as that, and then to collaborate between us, between reporters in the same media, and also reporters from different media, because as we said, it's another thing, it's one thing the ship owners owning the media, it's another thing the reporters. So if the reporters really want to write about something, they have to collaborate between themselves, because if, you know, an administration thinks that I will fire someone because he or she wants to write a story if the administration believes that I will lose all their newsroom, they will not do that. But there is a lack of collaboration, and yes, we tend to be afraid.
If I may ask something as well, is where are we now? I mean, it doesn't sound, I mean, the work is there, the evidence is there. You've been following this story for months, over a year now. It's common knowledge what happened. It is somehow in a very wicked and screwed way, although yet admitted by the government that such things are happening. It's alluded, even if it's not admitted in the open. So what's next? You know, we are on an election year. We may have elections in a month or so, or in 2 months, or in 3 months, or 4 months max. And what's going to happen? Because the image that we get, the image that transpires through your research, is that our institutions are under a huge crisis. Because if the judiciary does not intervene, if there are efforts to silence the independent authorities whose job is actually to control these institutions, if politicians don't react or react in a very mild way, because we haven't seen also from the political parties creating, I mean, there has been efforts, but, you know, we didn't see big splash waves here or there. So where are we now? You know, if we take, you know, journalists are being threatened, they're being followed. The media seems to have a really, you know, a huge lack of transparency. They create a different reality, and that's very obvious in Greece. I mean, it's something that we discuss very often is that there seems to be a generational gap there, that people who actually get informed by TV, like the older generations, have a completely different image of what's going on in the country from people under a certain age who actually get informed by a variety of sources. So where are we now? I mean, the image that you have been painting through your research is really dark and very worrying. So what do you make of that?
Okay, I know what I would say. So, first of all, I think that we are ready. Nicholas will say for himself, but we are ready to go back to the early days of writing alone about the story. So we started also inside story. We started about the story, and no one really cared from the mainstream media, and we will go on. We will make more revelations, even if the story will not come into the spotlight again as did with Dimitriadis, but also then with the revelations that a minister, Hatzidakis, was surveilled, that top-ranking people from the army were surveilled. So this is the most important for us, the psychological effect that we will go on regardless of what's happening. We believe in that story regardless of what other people do. And the thing is that, okay, for me, it's obvious that the government and the prime minister survived. The most survived in August and survived even now in January with ADAE, revealing that these people, as I told you, were surveilled. I think that then it was them, I mean, Hatzidakis, Floros, and other people surveilled from the state that should have come out if they wanted and say, this is unacceptable, because it's not about Hatzidakis. Hatzidakis is member of the Greek government. This is the role. It's the role that has been surveilled, not Hatzidakis. If Hatzidakis was not in the government, he wouldn't be surveilled. It's the minister, so you bear the responsibility of the public place you have, and this goes without saying for people being in the army. They have the responsibility. And so when these people didn't talk, of course the government survived. And the problem is that, Mitsotakis didn't take the responsibility, and things remain, as Nicola said, now maybe the next prime minister, regardless of the ideology, would think that, okay, I will surveil my minister and everything will be fine, because the previous survived to that, so who cares? So that's the main problem. But I think, and I will try, that after the elections there will be a second, not a second round, but the story will be on even after, because the problem is rule of law. Brussels and European institutions seem to understand, and I think that they understand the importance of the scandal and of the situation of the rule of law in Greece. And so I think that more revelation will come. We will really try. And yes, so I'm optimistic about the fact that the scandal and journalists will be there to investigate it. I said a lot, sorry.
I have also two questions. The first one is on, you know, I don't know if somebody have understood how these spyware systems function. So would like to tell us a bit, you know, what, because there's, you know, Intellexa and Predator, but I mean, nobody knows exactly how this is, you know, in technical terms, not exactly in technical terms, but, you know, yeah. And the second question is that about the history of these technologies in Greece, because I mean, from what I remember, Teloglu have some mentioned in a talk that you were together in this panel, that there is a history that starts with the Greek crisis and, you know, and some oil, yeah, gas stations, yeah. So use it in order, yeah, to detect each other. So.
The technical side, we cannot say much. I mean, with Predator, it's pretty simple how it works. You are supposed to get a link. You click on the link, as we are always kidding with ourselves. If you are naive enough to click on the link, it's a good thing, because then it can lead to a big scandal, you know. But it's not a zero-click application, in the sense that they are hacking your phone after you have made something with your phone, which means click on the link. Of course, but I'm saying things that I think everybody knows by now. The important thing is that this is not conventional, traditional surveillance. They do not wiretap the communication. They wiretap, they get hold of the content of your phone, which means that everything that is on the phone, while it can be archive files, it can be pictures, videos, and so on, but they can, all, of course, as everybody by now knows, turn your phone into a microphone. So that's why it's so scary, because they actually take hold of your whole life, private life and business life. And I think that one of the most depressing aspects of the story is that we can tell that some of the people who were targets of a Predator are silent because they are blackmailed. Actually, from our reporting, we have not published about that, but we know at least for two targets of Predator that they feel blackmailed, and this is why they are not open about that. You have a lot of people who we know were targeted, businessmen, businesswomen, and so on, and again, they haven't gone in the press to talk about that, which actually means that it worked, which also is very depressing if you think about that. But I mean, it's as simple as that, unless you wanted something more deeper when it comes to the technical stuff.
Yes, because there were some numbers, something like 20,000 people, something like that were followed, or...
that's different.
Ah.
We have to make a big distinction between the Predator surveillance and the official, legal, with a lot of quotation marks, National Intelligence Service surveillance. The number now is around 15,000 cases per year, only on national security grounds, which is an extreme number, of course, but this is not the number that goes with Predator or with Pegasus and all that. It's a different number. It has to do with the requests from the security services in Greece to ask the telecom providers to waive, to give them access to the content of the communication. So it's like a separate system, technically speaking. And what Teloglu said is very scary and deep and and dark, because and by now we are starting having evidence about that. We are when we started reporting on surveillance, we had some tips or information that we could not consider as credible, that there might be a relationship between this case and the Greek mafia case. By now, independently from our reporting, and we can talk more about reporting if you want about that, even if you just see Marinakis, who is one of the most powerful people in Greece, talking about surveillance, and at the same time accusing the Prime Minister's office that they are subject to pressure and to ties with the underworld, with the Greek mafia, you can see the link. If you see that the people who were taken out from their positions in the Greek police in September, October, November, and all that, that were people who had ties to the Greek mafia case, and at the same time they are the people who had ties to the surveillance case, you understand that actually, and this is of course a very dark reality, the two stories are one story. And it's a very dark reality, because it means that actually I was listening to an American podcast about that, which is good, because then you realize it's not a Greek problem. It's what in America they call the gray alliance, which is an alliance between politics, business, and crime. And I think that the really big question that we should, as journalists, but also as people trying to address in Greece right now, is that we have this grey alliance. We have now more and more visible ties between the political world, the business world, and crime, mafia. Yes. Yes, but by now I wouldn't call it evidence, but the indications are out there. There's so much. We can talk about that. It's the same universe.
If I may ask one last thing before we stop. I was very surprised by the story, because, you know, the people, I mean, the officials who have been wiretapped, because we're talking about officials of the state, not individuals, but people who play a role, were not from the opposition. Like in other wiretapping scandals, the most famous one, Watergate and so on, we had the surveillance of the opposition. Now, what we see in Greece so far, I think, as far as I was able to follow that investigation, we didn't have evidence, with the exception of the Communist Party in previous years, of wiretapping scandals and efforts, no, I mean, Androulakis, but as a potential partner and not as an opponent. So, I mean, it's obviously speculative, but could you actually offer us your assessment, your evaluation of why is that happening? What is the purpose of that? Why do we have this kind of like nude, kind of like reverse situation of the people who are followed are the ones in the same party, or people who are related to the governing party, to the government, essentially?
I have a conspiracy theory, if you want, that I can share with.
So everybody can share it with us.
No, it's a little bit cheap, but the problem is that they are surveying people because they only care about money. So if you see who they were surveying important ministers that had to deal with important portfolios where a lot of money is involved, like Hatzidakis with the energy sector. Politically speaking, maybe they don't wind up so much the opposition because they're not so relevant anymore. So they don't count a lot in the political game. But to be more serious about that, we don't really know. I mean, you have 15,000 wiretaps per year. It's not exactly like that, but let's say for the sake of the conversation, we do not know who is surveyed. I can tell you for sure that I think that hundreds of journalists are currently being surveyed, or in the last 20 years. And I suppose that also politicians are being surveyed, but we don't know, because successive governments never allowed ADAE, and especially the last one, of course, to play their role and to have, as Thodoris tried to explain, a secure encrypted digital archive so that they can be able to check. They can't. So we don't know. Maybe the opposition also is being surveyed.
Nicholas is right, and apart from I think that this is the reason. So money talks, money is listened, and also with the army, the thing is that the armaments. I mean, there's a lot of money flowing in this, so they listen to that, and they listen to the money because they want to control it. And there was also a story. This has been already published, not by us, unfortunately, because it's a great story. The fact that a minister made a trip outside from Athens, and a government guy called before Dimitriadis was a lot before the scandal, and the guy called the minister and said, "We know what you're going to do. Come back." And it was about the contract. It was about money. And I think that it has also something to do with a psychological aspect of this cabinet and of this circle around the prime minister, that they really wanted to control everything. I think that it was an upgrade in a sense that we govern, we run the country, not even with the party, we run the government with our team, and the party is a second circle. So, and the government is also a second circle. So the fact that Mitsotakis brought APE under his competence immediately after the elections, and then his own nephew, his blood, controlled the things, shows to me that there was a very small circle that ran everything. I wouldn't give that. I meant in a system, I meant in a system way.
May I ask, are there any more questions? Now, if there aren't, it's time to thank Thodoris and Nicholas again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you who have been supporting this seminar throughout the year. Thank you to the ones who have been here with us for the first time. Next time, actually, we have Athina Karajogianni, who's going to talk about Luxembourg's relevance for digital movement organization today. So we're going to talk strategy. So please join us. The full program is there, but it's also on our website. Thank you very much again, and have a lovely long weekend.
Παιδιά, θα πάμε και στο Bourbon να πιούμε ένα ποτό για ποιον θέλει να ακολουθήσει.
Ναι, το κάνουμε κάθε φορά, όποιος θέλει. Bourbon.
That was very interesting.